UFC Fight Night, Sodiq Yusuff versus Edson Barboza. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by Zan, I go by Cháirez as usual, fight by fight predictions, breakdowns from that betting perspective specifically. We want to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights to avoid, which underdog has the best shot at winning, and some parlay action toward the end of the video as well. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. And most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments when it's all said and done. For this UFC Fight Night event, it is taking place at the UFC Apex. We have 12 fights overall, 6 fights on the prelims, 6 fights on the main card. Let's get right to work with fight number 1 of our prelims. We are looking at Ashley Yoder versus Emily Ducote. Now, for this fight, Ashley Yoder, 2-fight losing streak. She lost to Jinh Yu Frey. That was all the way back in July 2021. Stylistically introduced as a BJJ practitioner as well as Muay Thai fighter. A lot of fakes and feints in terms of her striking. Doesn't really have the quickest hands. Same with the feet. Not amazing there in any way. Her fighting in general, it's almost like a sparring pace on the feet. So her striking is just not the best. I mentioned she's introduced as a BJJ practitioner. She does land just over a takedown per fight, so not super impressive there. Just 69% takedown defense, so not super impressive there either. But again, like I mentioned, she is a grappler. She is even comfortable on her back to that point. You know, she'll shoot for triangles. She'll go for chokes. She will look for those submission attempts, but she can't really keep up that pace. Not really too confident in her cardio. And look at her record, 8-8. Just not really too confident in her being a UFC level fighter in general. So let's see how she performs in this one, going up against Emily Ducote, who is also on a 2-fight losing streak. She lost to Lupi Godinez back in May. Patient on her feet. She does have an active jab. The boxing is pretty clean. The combinations are pretty clean. Some calf kicks included in her game. Otherwise, expect a bit more of a boxing approach more than anything. Decent footwork to go along with it, decent timing, decent counter punching as well. She does prefer more of a technical style of matchup. Might not be the best at handling pressure, but very much a stand-up artist. I have seen her land a takedown here and there before her time in the UFC. She does have a few submission wins on her resume as well. She does have active ground and pound. Those are a few things to note. Also worth noting, 90% takedown defense, but again, stylistically, expect her to be a striker more than anything. Really, for this fight, look no further than the takedown defense from Emily Ducote at 90%. Let me not spend too much time here. I think that Ducote is significantly better as a striker. I think that Ducote is more capable of, stuffing any of Yoder's takedowns. And I don't really trust Yoder's gas tank, even if she were to land a takedown. So Ducote should be all over this one. She should make it look pretty easy, or at least pretty unanimous from a scorecard perspective. I'm not even too mad at the odds here, although they do keep going more in favor of Emily Ducote, but it should be pretty easy for Emily Ducote, so she's going to be my pick to get it done here.
Yeah, they got Emily as a big favorite in this fight. Both fighters, to me, they're not going to go far in this division at all. Pretty low level. But when I break it down, I look at Yoder. She's gonna have the size advantage. That glances out at me. She's gonna be the taller fighter. She's gonna have the reach. But her striking is not really that effective. Her grappling is what she wants to do. That's where she gets her good work in. But her takedowns aren't the greatest takedowns, and she's not the best grappler. But again, that's where she wants to get her work done, is get this to the mat, utilize some grappling. Because on the feet, I think Ducote is going to be the more effective striker, even though she is much shorter than Yoder. I think that straight's going to be there all day. Yoder's striking defense needs a lot of work, and she hasn't patched it up, so I don't expect her to fix it at 35 years old. I think she's going to come out with the same game plan, like Cháirez said. It's kind of like a sparring match. She moves her around the ring, just spams certain strikes. But I think Ducote is going to be landing that straight all fight. And so I got to go with Ducote in this fight. I don't like the odds. I can't trust her as such a big favorite, because if Yoder can get this to the mat and can do damage, she can make this fight a little bit more sticky. But I don't think that's going to happen at this point in her career. She was never a good fighter. And I think I think they're throwing her a bone. Her previous 2 fights in the UFC were against tough fighters. I think this is a fight that the UFC wants to give her. It's a layup. Get in the win column, and then we're going to see what the UFC has next for Emily Ducote. But I think the UFC wants her to win here. So I'm going to go Emily Ducote here, keeping it on the feet and winning a striking match.
Second fight of our prelims, Chris Gutierrez versus Alatengheili. Chris Gutierrez lost to Pedro Munoz. That was back in April. High-level striker. We know he has high striking IQ. He picks his shots really well. We know he has that really dangerous calf kick approach to his game. Definitely one of the best in the UFC at using it. Probably the best. Switches stance a lot. Really light on the feet. He's going to use a lot of fakes, a lot of feints, good distance management. He's a very technical striker, very technical fighter in general, but that's really his only approach, right? Don't really expect takedowns. 74% takedown defense, which is pretty decent in terms of his ability to keep fights on the feet. But again, really just looking for that technical style of striking, looking to outpoint you, looking to sort of outclass you from a striking perspective. Alatengheili 2-fight winning streak. He beat Chad Adenheiliger back. That was just over a year ago, 13 months ago. Solid overall striker, pretty dynamic, pretty comfortable on the feet. His hands are pretty quick. The timing is there. The counter punching is there as well. The power is definitely there with Alatengheili, especially with that overhand right. He likes to kind of stalk you down looking for that overhand right. So watch out for that if you're Chris Gutierrez. Look out for pretty much just boxing out of him in terms of that striking style, but he is not one-dimensional. He can land takedowns. Wouldn't really call him a wrestling specialist by any means, but he landed 2 takedowns in his last fight. We see the takedown numbers there at 1.78 per. So again, he's not someone who's going to be completely one-dimensional here. Chris Gutierrez avoids the Montel Jackson fight that was supposed to happen last week. And he gets an opponent here in Alatengheili who I feel is not as dangerous. Don't get me wrong, Alatengheili, very solid fighter, dangerous striker, but I don't feel like his style of striking will particularly give Chris Gutierrez problems here. I don't think he's active enough as a striker. I don't think he pushes the pace enough as a striker to give Chris Gutierrez a lot of problems here. I also feel like he's not, like I said, enough of a wrestling specialist to make an impact there against Chris Gutierrez, who's going to be mindful of that, going to be mindful of the, managing the distance, who's going to be active with his movement, who has, decent takedown defense, like I mentioned. So I can, for the most part, see him avoiding those takedowns. So I see a striking match. I see Gutierrez getting the better of the striking as the quicker technician with a more complete style of MMA striking. Don't get me wrong, Alatengheili at these odds, he has value, right? He can land that fight-changing punch. But I'm going to roll with Chris Gutierrez in this matchup at least 8 times out of 10 versus this type of opponent. So I'm going Chris Gutierrez here to get it done.
Yeah, Chris is a big favorite in this fight, and I definitely understand why. He's gonna be the taller guy. He's gonna have the striking advantage, and Alatengheili does have wrestling, but that's not really what he wants to do in there. He wants to keep it on the feet. He does turn for the wrestling. He does have good IQ, so I think in a fight like this, he might utilize some grappling, knowing that Chris is a specialist on the feet with his striking. Chris has really good kicks, good range, good movement, good timing, good distance control. And I think with his height advantage, that's going to be a problem for Alateng to deal with. But at these odds, man, I think Chris should definitely win the fight. I definitely think so. But at these odds, you're going to have Alateng 4-1. He does have good boxing. I think he even has the boxing advantage in this fight. He's not going to have the kicking advantage, but I actually think he has the boxing advantage. He's going to have the wrestling advantage, and I think he has the heart. I think he's the guy that if they get hurt, it's not over. But I think if Chris gets hurt, I think Chris could I think it could change the way the fight goes. I'm not sure Chris has the heart of Alateng. I'm not saying that's the decider in this fight. I think Chris should definitely win the fight, but I see a lot of value on the highly Alateng side. The upside with the wrestling, the upside with the boxing, the power, and he's on a 2-fight winning streak as well. So Chris 100% should win. Odds dictate that because Vegas really knows what's up here. But I'm gonna roll with the underdog, the sizable underdog. I'm gonna go with Alatengheili to somehow get this one done.
Fight number 3 of the prelims. We're looking at Irina Alekseeva versus Melissa Dixon. Alekseeva 2-fight winning streak. She beat Stephanie Edgar. That was back in her April debut. Solid striker. Her activity is definitely there. Her combinations are there. She does have a lot of pop on her strikes. Looks like she's trying to be that fighter coming forward. She has a bit of that walk you down sort of Jessica Andrade style in that regard. And also not completely one-dimensional. I have seen her land a takedown or two. She does have aggressive ground and pound. She only 5 wins, but she does have 2 submission victories to her name, including her last fight. What I will say with her to watch out for, though, is some cardio concerns. You know, I've seen her gas out in the past. Her debut was high action, but it was only 1 round. So still remains to be seen if cardio is a big concern with her going forward. Going up against Melissa Dixon, who is an undefeated UFC newcomer, 5-0. She last competed in November. So it's been almost a year since her last fight. Looking pretty fluid on the feet from what I've seen, looking like a patient striker from what I've seen. Fights from distance. She takes her time. She looks for her shot. She can definitely work that clinch. Again, really patient with that cage control and using that to her advantage. She can also land takedowns from what I've seen. She is good on the ground from what I've seen. Good top control, good ground and pound. BJJ brown belt on top of that. Definitely seems to be a fighter with good IQ, good control in general, at least based on the opponents that she's faced before her time in the UFC. And it's enough to make her a favorite in this one. I can see why she's the favorite. I can see Alekseeva being the more dangerous fighter, but I can see Dixon being the sturdier fighter who's more durable, who's more reliable in rounds 2, in rounds 3. Watching Dixon's last fight makes me lean more toward her in this one. She took on an opponent who really brought the fight to her early. Good combinations. She was kind of piecing her up. She was landing cleanly. And Dixon, she took it. She warded the damage. She eventually closed the distance. She worked the clinch. She landed the takedown. She defended a submission. And then she ended up finishing that fight via ground and pound. So that tells me that Dixon should be able to weather the early storm that Alekseeva probably throws at her. And from there, I see Melissa Dixon prevailing as the sturdier fighter on points. So as long as Dixon can get out of that first round, I do like her in this spot. Relatively speaking, it is a low-level fight, so anything can happen. But what I'm anticipating is a competitive round 1. Alekseeva is then gassed. Dixon wins rounds 2 and 3. So I'm going with the newcomer to get it done, Melissa Dixon.
Yeah, this fight really does come down to that first round, and if Alekseeva can get her out of there, because history does say her cardio is her weakness, and Melissa Dixon seems to have decent cardio. Melissa Dixon has wrestling, has grappling, and in this fight, I know Alekseeva has the background with the sambo and the judo, but I actually think Melissa has the better grappling. She's good at getting your back. She's good at taking you down, controlling on top. Those are all good things to see in the women's division. And again, if she survives that early onslaught that Cháirez is talking about, I think this is a fight that the cardio is going to show. And I think Melissa's going to get it to the mat. And Alekseeva is not going to really have much gas left. So I'm going to go with the newcomer, Melissa Dixon here, to get the win in her debut.
Let's talk fight number 4 of the prelims. Terrance McKinney versus Brendon Marotte. Terrance McKinney beat Mike Breeden back in August. He's a finish or be finished type of fighter. We know that about him already. 100% finish rate with the 14 wins, with the 6 losses, all of those via finish as well. So definitely a do or die type of fighter. He's a southpaw. He's really dangerous with his hands early in the fight. Aggressive pace, super explosive. Though he's not really the most technical by any means. Starting to show a bit more patience. Starting to show like he's working the stand up a bit, more fakes, more feints, more level changes, more setups for those takedowns because he is a good wrestler. 3.5 takedowns per fight, 85% takedown defense to go along with that. But of course, with Terrance McKinney, in addition to the IQ being a red flag, the cardio has been a huge red flag for him. Once he's gassed out, he's prone to making a lot of errors. So he's one of those fighters. If he doesn't get it done early, you get a little nervous for him going forward. But he's going up against Brendon Marotte, who's making his UFC debut. 5 of his 8 wins via KO TKO was the first thing that I noticed. Second thing that I noticed, the records of his opponents. 11-20, 3-1, 8-4 in his last 3 wins. And you look at his record 8-1, his only loss was against a fighter who was 5-1. So that tells you that he's not exactly taking on the highest level of competition. He does have a dynamic walk you down style of striking with the competition that he's faced so far. Good calf kick, good distance management. Look for some switch stance out of him as well. He can also be aggressive. He can also land combinations when he puts that pressure on you. Hard for me to go against Terrance McKinney here for a few reasons. Level of competition on the side of Brendon Marotte, UFC experience on the side of Terrance McKinney, the takedowns from Terrance McKinney, but also I don't think that Marotte really has the tools to get it done outside of having a puncher's chance, which is pretty possible against Terrance McKinney. But McKinney, huge favorite. He should be a pretty safe pick here. He will not be a pick that I bet on because I can't fully trust his style, but this should be Terrance McKinney's fight to lose. So Terrance McKinney is going to be my pick. Huge favorite. Should get it done, no problem.
Yeah, ultimately we're looking at a fight where Terrance McKinney is better everywhere. Like he's a much better striker. He's a much better wrestler. It's just that cardio, and that's the only concern I have with on the Terrance McKinney side. Plus, Brendon Marotte is coming in short notice. He is filling in for what's his name? Duncan. What's his name? Chris Duncan. So this is a short notice fight for him. So he's coming in as a fill-in. I believe if the UFC really thought much of this guy, I think they would have put him through the contender series. Throwing him right in here, I think they're kind of throwing him to the wolves here. I think Terrance McKinney is going to run through this guy. His cardio, again, we know that's a concern, but this is not that type of fight. I think Terrance McKinney is getting a much easier opponent, a less dangerous opponent. That I think that he should be able to give us 2 good rounds in this fight, for sure, in my opinion. So I'm going to go Terrance McKinney here. I think he's going to get an early knockout, early finish, or submission. But I see him getting it done early.
Fight number 5 of the prelims, Tainara Lisboa versus Ravena Oliveira. Looking at another sizable favorite in Tainara Lisboa. She's on a 4-fight winning streak. She beat Jessica Rose Clark in her May debut. 6 wins, 6 finishes, 3 KO, TKO, 3 submission. So has been a pretty consistent finisher in her time in MMA so far. Muay Thai background, the striking is pretty clean. Good combinations, expect some forward pressure from her, but also expect her to be patient. She does have good striking accuracy. She's a good counterpuncher as well. Her tie clinch is pretty effective with the activity, with the knees, with the elbows, things like that. Her clinch game against the cage isn't too bad in general either. And I have seen her work her way to takedowns. 1 takedown landed in her debut. Positional ground control is there. Defended takedowns fairly well in her debut as well. So she looks to be a pretty complete fighter from what I've seen, or I should say a fighter that doesn't have any glaring weaknesses. Ravena Oliveira, UFC newcomer. She's on a 7-fight winning streak. She has a 100% finish rate. 6 of her 7 wins via KO, TKO. So she definitely has been dangerous. She is an explosive striker. from what I've seen. Not afraid to brawl with her opponents. Her technique, however, isn't the cleanest. She does have a decent one too, does have decent kicks. She uses her jab pretty well. She also has a pretty active tie clinch with those knees as well. I think this fight can be competitive. I think this fight can go back and forth a bit here. You're looking at two tough Brazilians that are adding some depth to this women's division, to this women's bantamweight division specifically. But I'm siding with Tainara Lisboa mainly because I think her game is cleaner. I think her striking is cleaner. I think she can be more effective. She's a good counterpuncher. She moves well. And I think that's going to prepare her well for Ravena Oliveira's style of striking. Lisboa is also more intentional with looking to land takedowns. So if the striking does get sticky, I feel like she can resort to that. Ultimately, you are looking at two unproven fighters, so anything can happen. But getting a win in her debut just 5 months ago, I think that is a meaningful advantage for Tainara Lisboa. And I think that's going to make me side with her. And I think Vegas agrees with her being a sizable favorite. I actually do think she makes it look fairly easy. I'd be careful with the odds. I don't think they should be this steep. But when you just match up this fight analytically, Lisboa should get it done, no problem.
Yeah, I think Lisboa is gonna run through. I think she's gonna run through this Ravena girl, man. Lisboa is like a multiple-time Muay Thai champion. High level striking. She actually had a Muay Thai fight with Valentina, her first fight, back in 2010. Um, in a Muay Thai fight. So she's high level, man, and it showed in her first fight in the UFC against Jessica Rose Clark, and she also whipped out some jujitsu, right? That obviously she's putting a lot of work in. I think on the feet, I think that's where Ravena wants to go, and I don't think she has a chance there. And like Cháirez said, Lisboa's her grappling is not bad. I think Lisboa runs through her, man. Again, she's unproven. She had one fight in the UFC. It was 3 good rounds or two, yeah, 3 good rounds. She looked really good in that fight. I think this is a step down in competition as well. So I think Lisboa looks good in this fight and gets the win.
Sixth and final fight of the prelims, Darren Elkins versus TJ Brown. Elkins' unanimous decision loss to Jonathan Pierce back in December. Tough veteran, 39 years old. I would say his stand-up is below average. He does like to engage. His jabs are active. His combinations are pretty active as well. And he does put the pressure on you, comes forward with that pressure. He's been able to take a hit, even though he definitely wears the damage, the bruises and the cuts that show up easily and often with him does not look good in the eyes of the judges. So you want to be careful with that if you're on the betting side of Darren Elkins. We know that he can land takedowns, 2.73 per fight. That definitely is an active part of his game. He landed 2 takedowns in his last fight, for example. Definitely can push that heavy wrestling pace on his opponents. And we know just in general, he has the pace, he has the heart, he doesn't stop. He's going to be someone that's going to give you maximum effort in every fight that he's in. TJ Brown, on the other hand, lost to Bill Algeo back in April. He's probably one of those fighters that are a bit better on paper than in actuality. I mean, you look at his record, they're 17-10. That should kind of tell you the story with him. He is powerful, he is fast, he does have good in and out movement. He likes to come forward, he likes to push that pace. The combinations look pretty good. Decent lateral movement. He's also good at landing takedowns. We see the numbers there even better than Darren Elkins' numbers. 3.5 takedowns per fight, 55% on the accuracy side of things. Has active ground and pound to go along with it, is also a black belt to go along with it. He doesn't have the best takedown defense, though. That can definitely be a concern here. Cardio has also been a question mark in his fights, so that's definitely something you want to look out for as well. Brown should be the better fighter here as the favorite. But I'll be honest, I think this is one of those fights that has trap written all over it. Brown, again, like I said, he should have the better striking, should be better at landing takedowns against Darren Elkins' 58% takedown defense. That said, Darren Elkins should be able to land takedown against TJ Brown and his 36% takedown defense. Elkins can make it scrappy. Elkins can wear on TJ Brown, who has been known to fade, especially with the pace that he fights at. And TJ Brown just doesn't really have the highest IQ, right? So this is a very winnable spot for Darren Elkins. But I am going to go with TJ Brown because ultimately I can't side with Darren Elkins' style. I can't side with him being past his prime, 39 years old, more toughness than skill. I just can't side with that, right? A Darren Elkins win wouldn't surprise me at all, but ultimately I'm going to side uncomfortably with TJ Brown to get it done in this spot.
Yeah, this is a really sticky spot here because I think TJ Brown, like you said, I think he's the better guy here in this fight. He's the younger guy as well. But it's just the guy has 10 losses, right? And Elkins has 11 losses. These guys know how to lose. And TJ Brown, he this guy could be winning and he just makes a mistake and all of a sudden Elkins has him in a submission and Elkins wins by submission. TJ Brown has questionable cardio, but in his fight versus that South American guy, forgot his name, man. It was his first fight in the UFC, but his cardio looked good in that fight. He was able to go the 3 rounds against Eric Silva. Thanks. So he was able to go the 3 rounds, or yeah, 3 rounds in that fight. He looked good in the third round when the third round started. So I think his cardio could hold up for at least 2 rounds here against Darren Elkins. On the feet, I think TJ Brown is the more dangerous guy. I think Elkins has that style that wears on you, tries to break you. Elkins has heart, so he's going to keep going. And that's one thing going for him. He has the cardio as well. He has good wrestling and the experience. So there's a lot of things going for Elkins in this fight. I definitely could see Elkins winning the fight. That's why I think this is a fight you don't want to bet. It's real sticky. But I got to make a bet for the channel. I'm going to go with TJ Brown in this spot. But again, yeah, this is a fight where I could see TJ Brown looking good, looking really good, and making a big mistake, and then the fight the fight changes, right? So I'm gonna go TJ Brown, but I'm not making any bets or plays on this one.
All right, let's move to our main card where we have 6 fights as well. We're going to start with fight number 1 of the main card. We have a good one here, Christian Rodriguez versus Cameron Saaiman. Rodriguez beat Raul Rosas. That was back in April. Good hands. He's going to stand in front of you, exchange shots with you. Good consistent pressure. The combinations are there. The power is pretty solid as well. 66% takedown defense. He has given up 11 takedowns in his last 3 fights, which could be relevant for this one. But he does have some ground IQ, nearly a takedown per fight, few wins via submission. Stylistically, definitely prefers to keep it on the feet, though, where he is pretty solid. Cameron Saaiman beat Terrance Mitchell back in July. One of the youngest fighters on the roster, still just 22 years old, so expect big improvements from him on a fight-over-fight basis. Pretty quick on the feet, some switch stance, poised. The movement is clean, for his age, especially very patient, very poised, like I mentioned. Good calf kick that he's going to use regularly. The striking technique, the striking diversity is definitely there. And he can also be explosive when he needs to be. I mentioned the takedowns could be relevant in this one. 1.3 takedowns per on the side of Cameron Saaiman. He landed 2 takedowns in his last fight, for example. He does prefer to strike, but the takedown ability is there. And the cardio holds up with a solid pace throughout the fight from what I've seen in his fights so far. This fight was supposed to happen in July. Christian Rodriguez withdrew at the time. My opinion on the fight is still the same, though. I do like Cameron Saaiman in this spot. I'll be honest, I'm even surprised that he's an underdog. I think this should probably be a pick'em because I do think this is a close fight. I think it's a good striking battle on both sides. I'm definitely anticipating a competitive fight. Both guys can work the ground game a bit as well, even though they both prefer striking. But the way that I see it, Cameron Saaiman, more dynamic as a striker. The speed advantage, I think, will be relevant. The movement advantage on the side of Saaiman, I think, will be relevant as well. I think those are going to be advantageous factors for him. Whereas Christian Rodriguez kind of wants to just stay in front of you. I don't think Saaiman is going to appeal to that sort of style for Rodriguez. On top of that, Saaiman, to me, the more dangerous striker, dare I say. And that's probably a controversial take, but within those striking exchanges, I think that Saaiman can get the better of Rodriguez throughout the fight. So Saaiman's going to be my pick. I don't want to be overconfident whatsoever. He is, in fact, the underdog. So that tells you what Vegas thinks about it. But I think this is a good value spot here. I'm going with Cameron Saaiman to get it done.
Yeah, this is a real tough one, man. This fight, I'm definitely not betting. I think both guys are really good prospects, and I think both guys have a really good ceiling in the UFC. Who's gonna win this fight? It's really tough because both guys are good at striking. Both guys have some grappling, and these guys are the next guys up. I'm surprised the UFC is putting them against each other. Someone's gonna have to take an L, have a little setback after this fight. But breaking this fight down, I see Christian Rodriguez having some good hands. I like his hands. I like his counters. He has smooth boxing. But as far as the kickboxing, I got to give that to Saaiman, Cameron Saaiman. I think he has more of a kickboxing approach. He throws kicks. He mixes in the hands as well. When we're talking pure boxing, I like Christian. When we're talking kickboxing, I think Cameron is the better kickboxer. Plus, with his footwork, it's a tough one. I feel the UFC they're trying to take over that African market. I think obviously they got to fight and figure out who wins this fight. They got to find out on the cage. But I think the UFC is leaning towards on the Cameron side. I think the UFC wants Cameron I think the UFC believes Cameron can get this one done, even though Christian is a dangerous fighter. Because you got to look at how the UFC is treating Christian. They threw him to Rahul Rosa, so Rahul Rosa could use him as a stepping stone. They threw him to Rahul Rosa, so Rahul Rosa can take him down and choke him out and get a win. They didn't expect Christian to win that fight, so Christian is definitely better than the UFC believes. But the UFC was throwing this guy to Rahul, and Rahul wasn't obviously not ready. I think Cameron is a much stiffer test. On the feet, Cameron's going to welcome the striking. So I think it's a matter of who can really get their game going, who can land those heavy shots. I think both guys are going to be able to do so. But I'm going to go with Cameron here to get it done in a fight that I really think can go either way. I just think he's a bit more. He has a bit more tools in the striking. He's going to be able to kick. Throw those kicks constantly. He can land leg kicks. He can mix it up with his hands. I just think he has a more well-rounded striking game. So I'm going to go Cameron to win this fight, but I really do think this fight is 50-50.
Second fight of the main card, Edgar Cháirez versus Daniel Lacerda. Catchweight fight here. I'm not too sure what they agreed upon, but nonetheless, Cháirez, 6 of his 10 wins via submission. First thing to call out with him, good fluid movement on the feet, good calf kick, good jabs, good feints, good fakes. The head movement is there. Solid striking in general. He fights from the outside. He fights from distance. Almost has a style where he's trying to bait you in as a counterpuncher. Wouldn't say his wrestling is good, but the grappling is definitely solid. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But also remember, he had Tatsuro Taira locked up in a few guillotines in their fight, though they were kind of low risk, low reward type of submission attempts. But again, we'll get to that a bit later. Daniel Lacerda, on the other hand, finish or be finished type of fighter, 100% finish rate on both of his wins and his losses. He's introduced as a striker. He's a southpaw, pretty comfortable with his striking. The kicks are really sharp. The pace is consistent, and he's one of those fighters that are always trying to press forward. I have seen good takedown entries from him. I have seen aggressive ground and pound. Just 2 takedowns landed in 4 UFC fights. So, I have seen good positional ground control with him, good grappling in general, and he comes from a good camp in terms of that ground game, that ground IQ. So he's someone that I'm going to trust from that perspective, even though from a submission perspective, he overcompensates a bit and it can cost him. So look out for that. Now, this fight's going to look familiar because it is a rematch of their fight that happened just last month. So if this almost seems like deja vu to you, this is intentional. If you recall, there was a premature stoppage in that fight, and it was in fact ruled a no contest as a result. You have to factor in what was happening in that fight before the premature stoppage. When they fought the first time, something that I anticipated was Lacerda's style of striking being dangerous. I said that Cháirez would have to weather that early storm and then hope that Lacerda fades. I also mentioned that Lacerda, being the better wrestler here, can potentially be a factor, but they both can grapple, right? In some ways, all that I played out, Lacerda looked good until Cháirez found that neck on that guillotine attempt. The same attempts that did not work on Tatsuro Taira is the same attempt that looked like it was working on Lacerda. And then, of course, we know that the ref stopped it prematurely. So in this rematch, hard to say exactly what's going to happen because Lacerda looked like he was going to look okay, at least in that first round. But Cháirez showing that he's dangerous and showing that he can use that aggressiveness against you. Now, a month ago, I went with Daniel Lacerda. In this rematch, I have to roll the dice on Daniel Lacerda again. I thought he looked okay until Cháirez found that neck, like I mentioned. Bigger underdog this time around. I think there's a bit of a lesson learned for him in giving up that neck when trying to clinch or trying to use takedowns. And I think he's going to benefit in a rematch situation, being more able to correct a mistake as opposed to an Edgar Cháirez who caught him, right? So Cháirez probably wins. Don't get me wrong, huge favorite, but Lacerda needs the win. Got to think he's fighting for his job. Got to think he kind of got a second chance, kind of got lucky in that respect. And I feel like he's going to work harder than ever to try to get it done, especially that he needs a win here. So Daniel Lacerda, again, is going to be my pick in this one.
Yeah, I gotta go, man. I gotta go Edgar Cháirez, man. I think he makes it. I think the first round could be sticky, but as the fight goes, Lacerda, I can't trust that guy, man. He has no cardio at all, and Cháirez seems to have enough toughness to last that first round. Let's be honest, he should have won that first fight. The referee did a terrible job, but I think he's gonna get the win here. I think he's gonna utilize pressure, utilize his boxing. And I see as the fight goes on, if he doesn't hurt him and get him out of there early, I see as the fight goes on, I see Cháirez doing what he wants, man, because at that point, Lacerda, his cardio really fails him. So I'm going to go Cháirez, man. I think he not runs through, but I think he gets it done here against Lacerda.
Third fight of the main card, Andre Petroski versus Michel Pereira. Pereira, a 5-fight winning streak. He split decision win over Santiago Ponzinibbio, although that was 17 months ago at this point. Athletically gifted, but definitely a lot more composed than he used to be. That's working to his advantage, 30 years old as he enters his athletic prime, or as he's in his athletic prime, I should say. Good movement, good fast kicks, good timing as a counter puncher. He has a kickboxing type of style. We know he can still get flashy. He can still be explosive. Good size as well, even though he's actually moving up a weight class. I don't think that's going to be an issue for him. He does have big power. I think it will translate to this middleweight division for him. Still has some IQ concerns, but he's one of those fighters that have a ton of talent, looking a lot more composed over his time in the UFC, and it's serving him well. 5-fight winning streak, as I mentioned. Andre Petroski, on the other hand, had a split decision win over Gerald Meerschaert back in August. He's also on a 5-fight winning streak. Now, from a striking perspective, the aggression is there, the pace is there, likes to come forward, big power behind his striking. I wouldn't call him a great striker, but he can be dangerous in that respect. Good wrestling base, good at getting takedowns, decent control on top, very comfortable on the ground. That's definitely a strength of his. The grappling is legitimate as well. Half of his wins are via submission. He sets up the submissions pretty well, good positioning, very patient in setting it up. With Andre Petroski, however, red flag cardio historically is not the best. His pacing is getting better. He was able to effectively wrestle and grapple for 3 rounds, in his last fight pretty much. So something that he's improving, but also something notable to call out as a red flag in the past. It is an interesting fight here. You're looking at 2 fighters that are riding 5-fight win streaks. You're looking at 2 fighters that have, reliable strengths to their game, but also 2 fighters that have vulnerabilities in their game where you can't fully rely on either one of them too much. Andre Petroski, decent striking at best, with that forward pressure, with that pace. But I think Michel Pereira should be too dynamic here with the movement. Petroski was having some issues with the movement of Gerald Mearshart, so I can only imagine the troubles that he's gonna have with Michel here. Now, Michel Pereira should also flat out be the better striker in this spot in terms of a ground game. Both of them can land takedowns. Petroski probably the better wrestler, or at least the more intentional wrestler. Both guys are good grapplers, so I don't particularly see one guy getting the better of the other in that one. But I think the key stat in this fight is going to be Michel Pereira's 94% takedown defense. I know he's moving up a weight class, but like I mentioned, I think he has the size to be able to compete. The takedown defense has been really good historically, and I think that's a number that's going to make you feel pretty confident siding with Michel Pereira here, especially at these odds. I think he's good at keeping fights on the feet, and I think his striking is better than Andre Petroski's. And I can also see Andre Petroski gassing out with a lot of takedown attempts, and then I can see a point where Michel Pereira is basically styling on him with the striking. So Pereira, better cardio, more durable. Although he does have 11 losses, only one of them via KO, TKO. Ultimately, I like Michel Pereira in this spot. I think there's actually pretty good value on him. The only risk in my eyes is the fact that he's moving up a weight class, but I think the size will translate well for him, and I think he's going to get it done in this spot against Andre Petroski.
Yeah, 100%, man. I'm on the Pereira side as well. Petroski has the grappling advantage. He's going to be the better wrestler in this fight, but Pereira has good distance control in the striking. He's really good at that, hitting from distance. So he's not going to make takedowns easy. And as the fight goes on, takedowns will be harder. Going up in weight, I think, is a great thing for Pereira. He was a big welter, probably the biggest welterweight on the roster. Going up is only going to help his cardio. He's not going to be as depleted when it comes to these fights. And I think it's just going to make him have a higher pace. So I like him in this fight. They're giving him a guy that he just has to stuff the takedowns, and he's going to do what he wants to do on the feet. He's the far better striker. And I think there's a bigger gap striking than there is in the grappling. So I'm going to go with Pereira with that sizable advantage on the feet. I think he gets it done.
Fight number 4 of the main card, Jonathan Martinez versus Adrian Yanez. Martinez 5-fight winning streak. He had that unanimous decision win over Said Nurmagomedov back in March. Good striker, good sound boxing, good movement. The kicks are great as well. His stand-up is kick heavy at times, has a really good calf kick, mixes it up really well. Really a complete striker, really a dynamic striker on top of that. I like his pressure. He's also patient. He's constant in his activity. Just half of a takedown per fight on his end. Also just 69% takedown defense. So that is somewhere where he can be a little bit vulnerable. But the ground IQ is definitely there. He can definitely work his way back up if he is taken down. Also, zero concerns from a cardio perspective. This is, one of those fighters who's proving himself to be a high-level fighter in this bantamweight division. Adrian Yanez still kind of trying to prove that, especially after losing to Rob Font back in April. We know he has really good stand-up, quick hands, good boxing, instant KO power, good movement, good timing, really pure and natural style of boxing. The hand speed is absolutely there. The counter punching is absolutely there. The combinations are really nasty when he lets the hands go. And he has some kicks as well. Good calf kick, good head kick. Although the striking is more of a boxing heavy style of attack. High stakes bantamweight fight, right? This is one of those fights that could be fight of the night candidate for sure. Should be an exciting one. Right away, I'm going to say avoid betting it. Just enjoy it as a fan. Adrian Yanez becomes an interesting case after his last fight versus Rob Font, right? Was it just a moment where Rob Font landed perfectly on him, or does he potentially have durability issues at this level of competition? So we've now raised some questions about Adrian Yanez as he moves up the ranks. The way that he was finished, it wasn't just a flash knockout. It was an exchange that the tougher guys find ways to survive. But outside of that, you are looking at two high-level strikers. Yanez, the better boxer. Martinez, the better overall MMA striker, in my opinion. Yanez, I think will be the more limited fighter here. Doesn't really work the clinch, doesn't really attempt takedowns. And, although it's going to be really exciting, I don't like really the betting side of Adrian Yanez here. I think to bet Yanez, you're kind of banking on Yanez hurting him. Yanez somehow, being levels higher than Martinez in the striking department. And I don't think that's likely. Whereas if you're on the betting side of Martinez, you're banking on Martinez being the scrappier fighter with more ways to win the fight, more willingness to land a takedown here and there, more willingness to kind of work that clinch, more complete with the overall MMA striking, potentially tougher as well after what happened in that Rob Font fight for Adrian Yanez. So, Martinez really showed me something in that Said Nurmagomedov fight. That was an impressive win, in my opinion. I think he's going to carry that momentum into this one. And I think he's going to get the win versus Adrian Yanez. I think he just has more ways to win and dare I say, more will to win. So Jonathan Martinez is going to be my pick here.
Yeah, this is one of those fights where my heart's saying Yanez gets this done. He somehow mixes it up. He has the better boxing, gets in there, lands a big shot. Martinez, yeah, he's been knocked down by Davy Grant. But aside from Davy Grant, he's held up, right? He hasn't been finished by anyone else. And Davy Grant has proved that he has power. So his chin is good. Yanez was knocked out in his last fight, but before that, he hasn't been finished as well. So both guys can take a shot, I believe, in a striking fight. Jonathan Martinez is going to be able to utilize his reach, his kicks, fight at range. He's better at fighting at range. The better kickboxer, smooth. He has knees up the middle. Yanez has the box in this fight. Literally can go either way. Again, this is one of those fights I'm not going to put a bet on. Sit back and watch. I think these guys, I think this is really a 50-50, just like Tapology's showing. But I'm going to go with Jonathan Martinez. I think that win against Nurmagomedov, I think that was a big win. I think Nurmagomedov has proven that he's a legit fighter in that division. And for Martinez to get a unanimous decision against such a gritty, tough opponent, a guy that's good everywhere, and Martinez was able to keep it on the feet and outstrike a really, really good striker in that fight. Yanez poses different risk. Yanez has that boxing, but I think Martinez can deal with it. So I'm going to go Martinez, the more diverse striking attack, utilizing that reach, and I think he can get it done. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if Yanez catches him. He's really precise and really one of those fights that is a coin flip, right? So, but I'm going to go Martinez to get it done.
Co-main event of the evening. Let's talk Jennifer Maia versus Viviane Araújo. Maia unanimous decision win over Casey O'Neill. That was back in March. 2 wins in a row now. Decent boxing technique, good hands, good power. She has consistent movement in her style, that constant movement, that constant activity, good with combinations as well. She's also physically strong, good clinch game, good active usage of knees in the clinch should it sort of get tied up in that way. Good ground game as well, though she doesn't really land takedowns. She is active off of her back if she is taken down. Doesn't really have the best takedown defense to that point, but the ground IQ is absolutely there. She even has a few submission victories to her name. What I like about Jennifer Maia is that the cardio definitely holds up. She's going to be someone that's going to fight for your money. She's going to be someone that's a tough matchup against anyone. And she definitely showed that in her last fight, right? She showed that going up against I think a 26-year-old Casey O'Neill, someone that the UFC wanted to win. She showed that she's not here to be a stepping stone, not here to be a gatekeeper for the division whatsoever. Still very much here to compete. Going up against Viviane Araújo, who lost to Amanda Ribas. That was back in March. That's 2 losses in a row for her now. Very dangerous on the feet, especially early in the fight. We know she's really explosive. We know she has good power, good combinations as well. The footwork is good. The movement is pretty fluid. The jab is pretty effective. She's a good counterpuncher as well. And she has good, consistent forward pressure. Thing with Araújo, she can also land takedowns, right? Almost 2 takedowns per fight, almost 50% on the accuracy side of things. Those are good numbers. She's also a high-level grappler, good top control, physically strong. But the thing with her is that, especially at 36 years old, getting up there in age, she does slow down as the fight progresses. That's probably her biggest drawback. I think Jennifer Maia flat out wins the war of attrition here, right? I think Maia can be a lot more reliable in the durability department. And I think that's going to be the biggest determining factor for this fight. Both of these fighters getting up there in age, Maia at 35, Araujo at 36, but it looks like the age is having more of a negative effect on Araujo. I look at her last fight versus Amanda Ribas, and Ribas was able to outstrike her almost 2-1, right? I consider Maia a better striker than Ribas, so I don't think the striking is going to go well for Araujo here, despite how dangerous Araujo can be with the striking. Araujo, yes, is more likely to land takedowns here. Maia does not have great takedown defense, but I just don't think she has the stamina for that type of fight throughout 3 rounds. So I do see most of this fight occurring on the feet. I do see Jennifer Maia winning rounds 2 and 3, with that first round being competitive in either direction. So I'm going to say Jennifer Maia wins here, although you want to be careful, right? 2 high-level fighters, or at least 2 fighters that historically have been high level in this division. Anything can happen from that perspective. They're both getting up there in age, so any one of them can look old on that night. But I'm gonna think that Jennifer Maia gets it done. Like I said at the beginning, I think she's gonna win the war of attrition here. So I'm going Jennifer Maia as my pick.
Yeah, this is one of those fights where Viviane has cardio issues. Where I think she's gonna be winning the first round. She's gonna win the first round, I believe, and I think the second round could be sticky. The third round likely goes to Maia. But I actually think Viviane has 2 rounds in her in this fight. I think she could do enough to win 2 rounds, get some grappling going. I think her striking is pretty good as well. But I do think it's a close fight. Should go Maia's way. She is the favorite in this fight. She has really good boxing, has really good cardio. But I'm gonna bank on Viviane getting those first 2 rounds here, and Maia winning that third. So I'm gonna go Viviane here, 29-28 type of fight.
All right, let's talk main event. In that case, we're talking Sodiq Yusuff versus Edson Barboza. High stakes featherweight fight here. Sodiq Yusuff beat Don Cháirez last year, right around this time. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. Good jab, good pace. The patience is there. He picks his shots really well. We see him use that jab as a weapon. Quick striker, good at cutting the ring off, good at putting pressure on his opponents, good at closing distance, almost stalks his opponents down throughout the fight. And we know he can be really explosive. The thing with him, though, very much just a striker, right? Don't really expect any takedowns from him. 70% takedown defense, which isn't bad whatsoever, but probably won't matter in this fight. But again, like I said, I like that he goes at a steady pace, good pace, doesn't really slow down, good activity. He's going to be one of those fighters that are kind of always going to be in your face. Edson Barboza, on the other hand, beat Billy Quarantillo back in April. We know he's always dangerous on the feet. We know the MO of Edson Barboza at this point, high-level kickboxer, very quick with his striking, good fakes, good feints, good movement. We know the kicks are really nasty. We know the power is there, right? Look how he won his last fight via knockout, especially at this weight class, and generally good takedown defense as well. Very respectable on the numbers side of things at 75%. But again, that will not matter in this fight. This is kind of one of those then versus now type of fights. One of those sort of past versus current type of fights. And this one's super tricky because the quote unquote then fighter in Edson Barboza, the fighter past his prime, it's an Edson Barboza who's still highly competitive, right? This one's also super tricky because on the Sodiq Yusuff side of things, to go from Don Cháirez to Edson Barboza, definitely a huge step up in competition for Sodiq Yusuff, really compared to his entire resume, right? So this could be one of those Rob Font versus Adrian Yanez type of fights, or Pedro Munoz versus Chris Gutierrez type of fights. It could be a situation where the quote unquote now fighter in Sodiq Yusuff shows that he belongs at this level, right? I think about a few things. I think about Sodiq Yusuff versus Arnold Allen. I think about Edson Barboza versus Billy Q as well. Both fights tell me what I can potentially expect from a ring control perspective. Yusuff should be the fighter coming forward. And I actually think that can work to his advantage. I think about Billy Q's pressure against Edson Barboza. It was effective, right? Until Billy Q overcommitted, got caught by the knee. Sodiq Yusuff was able to pressure Arnold Allen pretty much all fight, but it was the threat of the takedown on the side of Arnold Allen that nullified Yusuff's pressure. Barboza won't be able to possess that same threat, right? So that leads me to think that Yusuff has a good shot here. Again, consistent pace, forward pressure, which I think will look better in the eyes of the judges. And I think he's smart enough to not get caught by Edson Barboza the same way that Billy Quarantillo did. That said, highly competitive fight. I think it can legitimately go either way. I think it, legitimately is a coin flip type of fight, whoever shows up more that day type of fight. Plus, it's a main event. We know how main events have been in the UFC this entire year. Plus, it's a high level fight. So, all the reasons to not want to bet on this one. But if I am forced to make a pick, I'm going with Sodiq Yusuff based on looking better in the eyes of the judges and being smart enough to stay away from Barboza's power. So I'm going Sodiq Yusuff. I think he gets it done. I think he passes the big step up challenge that he's going to be up against in this one.
Yeah, you got to go Sodiq Yusuff, man. He's not like Billy Q. This guy is way more dynamic, much more defensively sound as well in the striking. And you got to think at some point he's going to land a big shot on Barboza and pretty much get him out of there, unless Barboza is able to land that shot sooner. But one thing is for sure, man. Once Yusuff lands that bomb, Barboza at this age is not the same Barboza. He's not throwing as many leg kicks as he used to. He's still dangerous. He's still a really good striker. But again, he's not the same guy at 37. And I think Yusuff right now, UFC wants him to win. I think they're giving him a guy at the right time. It's going to be a striking fight. Yusuff wants a striking match. And I think Yusuff can take his shots. And I don't think Barboza can take Yusuff's shots. So I got to go with Yusuff at this point. I think he has more of a chin, more durable. And I think that's going to be a big thing in this fight where both guys land who can really take the shots that they're receiving. So I'm going to go Sodiq Yusuff here to get the win.
All right, let's take it to Vegas to wrap up the show. Let's talk about some underdog action. Let's talk about some parlay action as well. Of course, I will start off by reading the underdogs. Ravena Oliveira is an underdog versus Tainara Lisboa. Brendon Marotte is an underdog. Ashley Yoder is an underdog versus Emily Ducote. Alatengheili is the underdog. Irina Alekseeva, Darren Elkins, Cameron Saaiman, Daniel Lacerda, Andre Petroski. Adrian Yanez is the slight underdog in that one. Viviane Araujo, Edson Barboza. Who's your underdog pick?
All right. Underdog wise, I'm going with, let me see here. You go first, man. I don't even have my screen up here.
Yeah, for sure. My underdog is just kind of due to being surprised that he's an underdog. I actually thought he was going to be a slight favorite in this one. I'm going with Cameron Saaiman at 2.3. I think he gets the job done. And I think you brought up some great points where the UFC probably wants him to win this one and they think that he's going to pass this test. So I'm going Cameron Saaiman as my underdog pick.
Yeah, mine as well, Cameron Saaiman.
For sure. And then from a parlay perspective, which fights are you looking at?
I'm looking at Lisboa. I'm looking at Terrance McKinney. And I'm looking at Edgar Cháirez.
Edgar Cháirez. All right. So those three fights double up 2.06. That means that $100 will get you a total return of 206. For our bigger bettors, $250 will get you a total return of 516. In terms of parlay action on my end, I'm looking at some similar fights. Tainara Lisboa is one that I'm looking at as well, but I'm also looking at Chris Gutierrez to get it done, if I can find him right there. And then I'm also looking at Michel Pereira to kind of juice up the odds a little bit. And that's going to be a 2.55, meaning that $100 is going to net a total return of 255. And for our bigger bettors, $250 will net a total return of 638. So let's wrap up there. Let's end the show. This has been UFC Fight Night, Sodiq Yusuff versus Edson Barboza by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. And most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments how you feel about our picks, what your picks are, or whatever else you want additional conversation on. Let that be known in the comments, and we're more than happy to have that conversation with you. Otherwise, officially signing off, UFC Fight Night, Sodiq Yusuff versus Edson Barboza. He goes by Zan. I go by Cháirez. We are Boxing MMA Picks. And in our usual fashion, let's get this money.
Let's get it.